Greetings, Bowser.
I'm Ryan Coughlin, and this is Macroom. Macroom is a town full of colourful characters, artists, writers, musicians, and all-round sound people like myself. But what is it that makes this town tick? Who feeds our creativity? Who keeps us in fashion? Who takes care of it all? In this series, I'm going to answer these questions and interview some of the most influential people of our time. This is The Minds of Macroom. Hello, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So I suppose to start off, could you tell us how long the bookshop has been open?
40 years exactly. I started upstairs in these premises, and then I was down in the middle square for 21 years, and I'm back up here again with about 10 years.
Oh, right. So why did you move to the middle square?
I moved to the middle square because this place was being renovated, and there was a lot of building going on, and I needed to get a place, and then I was comfortable down there,
Yeah.
even though it was upstairs, so I was down there for 21 years.
Yeah, and how did that affect business at all?
People don't like going upstairs.
Oh, really?
No, a shop upstairs is not a good
Yeah.
is not a good idea. No.
Yeah. No, that makes sense actually, yeah. So, like, 40 years is a long time.
It is to you, yeah. It's only
Yeah.
yesterday to me, but it's a long time
Yeah.
to you because you're looking ahead.
Yeah, so, like, in that 40 years, have you seen Macroom change as a town? The people change?
I have seen the town change. Yes, people. I don't think people really change. The town has changed. It has improved a lot. Certainly, if one looks at shop fronts and businesses, and that it has improved over the years. There are a lot of empty premises at the moment, and obviously a lot of people are struggling to keep the show going, but I think that's temporary, and I have good hopes for Macroom in the future.
Oh, yeah. And how do you think the bypass will affect Macroom?
Initially, it will be a big shock to some businesses, especially at the edges of the town,
Yeah.
and that because it's not a great distance between Cork and Killarney, so anybody travelling will keep going initially. So the town will have to attract people in. It will have to introduce maybe events or specialist shops, or it will have to promote itself much more to get people to come off the highway.
Yeah. And you mentioned events there. One thing in the introduction to this series is we took clips from the 1981 Mountain Dew Festival.
Yes.
Would you think something like that could happen again in this day and age?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. There is so much difficulty with insurance, and I don't know if the town could cope with that sort of numbers.
Yeah.
Perhaps an offshoot of the jazz festival, or to be part of the jazz festival, or another bigger festival, a sort of a side event might be useful.
Yeah. And would you have an interest in jazz actually?
No, I hate jazz.
Really?
Oh, absolutely hate jazz. Yeah.
Yeah.
And classical. My musical tastes are very limited to, I suppose, 1950s country and western.
Oh, right.
American. American, yeah.
Yeah.
American country and western from the 50s. Beyond that, there are certain things I'd listen to and certain things I like. But when I was buying music, or if I was buying music,
Yeah.
it would be the old faithfuls,
Yeah. So do you remember the festivals that went on here?
I don't really remember the festivals, and I'll tell you why. Because I had a deprived life, in the sense of I spent 42 years marking Leaving Cert exams, and it was always on during the marking time.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have time to come downtown. I really didn't.
That's a shame, actually.
That's a pity.
Seeing the footage from back in the day, it's mad. Seems like Macroom is such a a free place back in the day.
It was an exciting time, and I can remember crossing the bridge and looking down where the pitch and putt course is now, the town park, and there were little tents and high booths parked outside the tent.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And the first year or two there, when milk was delivered door to door, people didn't have a bottle of milk on Sunday morning because it was all robbed by the people who were trying to put a breakfast together, because the town wasn't prepared for it in terms of food or accommodation or anything. But nobody cared, and I don't know, is it nostalgia, but the weather seemed to be finer then.
Yeah.
There
So
seemed to be
effect
fine summers.
of global warming now, I'd say.
Yeah.
So you said when you were a teacher.
That's right, yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about your time teaching?
I could. I spent 38 and a half years in De La Salle and Macroom.
Wow.
I spent a year before that in De La Salle and Waterford. So looking back again, it all seems to be like yesterday, but it was my chosen profession, and I'm glad I did go teaching.
Yeah.
It wasn't always easy, of course. Nothing ever is, but looking back, I can only remember the good times. I don't remember. I don't remember any bad times.
Actually,
you know,
that's a good thing. But so you were there while the brothers were.
I was
in
there.
De La Salle.
Yeah, I was employed initially by brother Paul Minehan,
Ah, right.
who tragically got killed in a road accident afterwards.
Oh.
And there were a few other brothers, brother Arnold and brother Adrian. Well, brother Adrian was in the national school, but yeah, the brothers were there for a good many years.
Yeah, yeah. And so it seems like you enjoyed your time teaching.
I did. I loved the holidays because it gave me time to read and time to buy books, and you know. Then in later years, I went back in 1999 and I did a higher diploma in what was called remedial and compensatory education.
Oh, really?
So I really enjoyed that, and I was involved in that until I retired.
Oh.
So it's more rewarding, or it's easier to a certain extent to deal with 2 or 3 people who have particular problems, and you feel you can make progress with them. Whereas in a general class, like, you feel the good fellas are going to survive anyway, like, and the bad fellas are only annoying you, like. So
Yeah.
you know, it's I found that very, very satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of work would you have been doing?
I would have been helping people with dyslexia and dyspraxia, and maybe they had been ill for a time and they needed to catch up on their homework, or on basic maths and stuff like that. And I would have been applying for compensation for them in exams if they needed a reader or a scribe, or if they needed technology. I'd be meeting parents, I'd be meeting people from the Department of Education.
Right, so you're very busy.
So it was very busy, but as I say, it was very rewarding.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And would you still be in contact with some of the people you taught?
Occasionally. Sometimes I meet these middle-aged balding men, and I'm trying to figure out, was I going to school with him or was I teaching him? Like, because there's a fine line now, people around 60 years of age, you know. But some I have never met, and that's a pity in a way. But I don't go to matches and I don't follow sport very much, and that would be an opportunity to meet them, you know. So I meet them at weddings and funerals and places like that, and then I'm scratching my head trying to figure out their names, you know, and I'd say, who else was in your class, like, hoping it would come back to me. Sometimes it does, and more times it doesn't, you know. But I like meeting past pupils, like, when it happens.
That's kind of you're reaping the fruits of.
Well, I don't know. At least they don't attack me, like, and they're usually very kind, and they want to buy me drink, especially at a wedding, like late at night. I remember one wedding, I think it was in Kinmare, and there were about 15 past pupils, and I was joking, saying I better get out of here now quick, because when these fellas have a bit of drink, like they're going to run me all the way to Kilgarvan, like. But instead of that, like, we had great crack, you know. And they were very kind.
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. Because some teachers we have now, I don't think they'd like to see us in 40 years' time. Yeah. So your passion.
The frightening part about it, sorry to interrupt you, the frightening part about it is they come out with these stories like that I have no memory of ever saying. I never said it, I swear I never said it. But they have it off by heart because they've been telling each other, do you remember what Cooney said, you know? And that's so it can be scary at times to what they come out with.
Nothing bad, I hope.
Oh, nothing bad, no.
Yeah.
Well, no.
We'll leave it at that. So, well, yeah. So your passion probably laid within English, and
English was my main passion. I taught history, which I loved, and Irish as well. But I suppose English really was number one with me. Like
yeah. And where did that love for literature and books and history as kind of stem from?
I think it stemmed from being an only child in the middle of nowhere back in Kilnamartyr with nothing else to do except to try and get a few books.
Yeah.
And I would have started with comics, and I'd have followed the pictures before I could read. I never remember learning to read. But it sort of came naturally, like, and there was no going back to it. I just couldn't get enough books.
Yeah.
I mean, the world is full of books now, like they're everywhere. Charity shops, you know.
Yeah.
But at the time, there were very, very few bookshops. There were very, very few books in houses. You know. So the library used to come to the National School, and somebody else and myself would go and pick out the books for the school for the month, you know.
Yeah.
And we'd keep all the best ones for ourselves and read them first and that, like. So otherwise I don't know it. I just put it down to that, you know.
And what is there a certain book that you remember reading and thinking, this is amazing?
I do. I got a loan of it from the teacher in 6th class, and it was John Mitchell's Jail Journal, where he talks about being taken out to Tasmania, to Van Diemen's Land.
Oh yeah.
In the middle of the 19th century, like, and that was the first real book I read.
Yeah.
Before that, it was westerns and detectives and stuff like that. So that really sort of set me on the road to historical works, and I don't know, I just loved reading, and that was it, you know.
And did you ever try your hand at writing?
Oh, I did, but the less said about that, the better. Like, no, that'd be too embarrassing to admit to that, you know. I suppose the usual sort of, you know, poems, attempts at poems and short stories and that, but it's not going to happen now. Like, I've resigned myself to the fact that I'm never satisfied with anything I write, you know. I hate the stuff I have written, and I just throw it away.
Yeah.
Unless I write my autobiography, but I'd want to be well dead, like, before I tell the truth, you know. Can't be hanging around, like, if I tell the stories that I could tell.
So, like, and then obviously you went into teaching, and was it while you were teaching that you decided to open a bookshop?
It was. I was buying more and more books, obviously, and the opportunity arose whereby I got the premises. I got a room here upstairs, and I went to an auction and bought a load of books, and just kept going from there, like. And it was always, and it still is, sort of a glorified hobby to a certain extent, like. But I mean, you can make a certain amount of money if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, like, forget about it, like, because you've got to know what to buy and buy it when you can, and you've got to sell it as well when you can, because there's a time to buy and a time to sell.
Yeah.
But sometimes really nice, good books, like, you know, it's a pity to sell them because I won't be able to buy them again.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know what you mean. And I suppose, what was it that inspired you to open a bookshop in the first place?
Poverty. Nothing gets a person going better than poverty, like, you know.
Really? Poverty?
Yeah, well, not poverty. That's an exaggeration. But
Yeah.
I was teaching with a young family, and just that extra bit of money,
Yeah.
however little, made a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
And I I've said that before, but I mean, I wasn't poor, like, obviously, you know what I mean, like, but that extra 10-20 pounds a week, like, at the time, made a difference, like,
Yeah,
it meant
yeah.
that you could have a holiday at the end of the year without having to worry about where the money was
Yeah,
coming from,
yeah.
you know.
And the bookshop must have been well received to say that it's still going to this day.
It was, yeah, it was. It became sort of a social club as much as a bookshop, because
Yeah, yeah.
regulars would call in anyway, whether they'd be buying or selling, and obviously it extended then, and I became known through doing book fairs, various book fairs in Cork. There were Cork book fairs. Then in the 80s, particularly, I organised my own book fair and invited other dealers to, you know, run the book fair with me. So we did bank holiday weekends in Kinsale, which was very, very good.
Yeah.
Tralee, Blarney. I did lots and lots of book fairs in Blarney.
Oh,
And again, it was something new and different at the time, and it's practically run its day now. There are still some good book fairs. There's a great book fair in Graignamanagh. There is a great book fair in Fethard, in Estymon, and there are regular ones in Dublin. But the smaller towns, you just couldn't get a crowd. You couldn't get enough enthusiasm to make it worthwhile. And again, insurance is expensive, and it's hard to get a room from a hotel, because you know, they want maybe 200 for the day to cover their costs and insurance, and it just wouldn't pay, like, you know.
Yeah. And do you think that the insurance kind of the sudden kind of spike in prices has resulted in do you think it's making it more difficult for people to express, like, cultural kind of events? And
I would think so, yeah, because you can't do anything now without having public liability insurance. And it's very hard to get insurance, I'd say, for maybe 2 days or 3 days. You know? I think the book fair in Graignamanagh now last year, for instance, they had to pay 1,000 for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And
you'd really be making a loss
that's
off
prohibitive,
that,
like, you know.
Yeah.
So each dealer then had to pay 20 extra, or 30 euro or something like that extra, to cover the expense of the insurance, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a one-story building in the middle of a field, really.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there was no risk.
Yeah,
but there's always risk if people, you know, for one reason or another, can't get from A to B without falling over.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and do you think that you owning a bookshop, have you seen maybe a decline in the amount of people coming in buying books, especially young people?
I don't know, which is a stupid thing to say, but all I know is that when the new library opened in Macroom, for instance, I lost the I lost the comics, I lost the younger children's books, and that. But apart from that, teenagers never frequented the bookshop. You know, whether that's because I was teaching, they wanted to stay away from me or not, I don't know. But teenagers never frequented anyway, like, you know. So the only change I see the change with younger children, say national school children, like, who are obviously going to the library and getting their books. And I mean, that's understandable, like, I mean, it makes no sense really to buy books anyway, because if you can get it in the library, why would you pay 10 or 20 euro for it, but
Yeah.
people love to have stuff. People love to have their books, and they like it on the shelf, and they like to
Yeah.
to own it and go back to it and that. Otherwise, I think the same percentage of people are still reading, I think anyway, like, because
Yeah.
if I look back at my class in school, my own class, and the amount of readers, there was only 2 or 3 really that I would call readers out of the class, you know.
Yeah.
So if anything, there's certainly more books being published, like, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There are thousands and thousands, and really not. It's not that there are too many, but there are too many copies of everything being published,
Yeah.
and there are warehouses full of them that are going to be they're going to recycling, you know, to be shredded, because it's economically not that much more expensive to have, say, 15,000 copies of a book as opposed to 8,000.
Yeah.
You know, and they may only sell 2 or 3,000, and then they're just in somebody's way, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite sad in a way.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. Like, I suppose somebody makes money out of it, like, but they're printing too many of the books they're printing, like, you know.
Yeah. So I think we're nearly out of time now. So I wanted to ask you if there was any book that you would suggest people our age to read. What would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. There are so many, but my favourite of all time, and the book I think that should be on every school course permanently, is Animal Farm by George Orwell. You know, you just have to read that. But there are so many, I don't know. I think you should read what you're interested in, you know. If you're enjoying it and you're benefiting in terms of just entertainment, then that's fine, you're entertained.
Yeah.
If you're learning something, that's so much the better. You're always learning in terms of vocabulary and the background to the story and that, but I think a lot of the problem is that people feel they must read the classics and they must read the good novels and all of that, whereas they'd be much better off to read non-fiction, you know. Read biographies, autobiographies, read history, read the history of sport, read the history of science, read, you know, widely, and you'll find a niche, you'll find a genre that suits you, and then you'll be sorted for life, because you'll never look back, you know.
Time has come to say all the things I had to see. Baby, take my eyes and blow away from all the petty jealousy. Run away.